The red wine was still dripping from my face when the entire Christmas party went dead silent. Amanda Carter had just called me a worthless nobody in front of everyone. What she didn't know? The billionaire walking through those doors was my husband, and he'd seen everything. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of important people, or wondered what happens when someone's cruelty finally catches up with them, you need to hear this story. What happened at that Christmas party changed everything I thought I knew about justice, dignity, and the power of having someone who truly sees your worth. Stay with me until the end. I promise you won't see this twist coming. But let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about that moment. It's about everything that led up to it, and how sometimes the universe has the most unexpected ways of teaching bullies a lesson they'll never forget. 3 weeks before Christmas, I received an invitation that made my hands shake. The envelope was thick, cream-colored paper with gold embossing that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Inside was an invitation to the annual Hartford Foundation Christmas Gala, one of the most exclusive charity events in the city. I stared at it for a full 10 minutes, wondering if there had been some mistake. You see, I'm not the type of person who gets invited to galas. I work at a community center downtown, helping families who can barely afford groceries, let alone designer gowns. My apartment is a studio with a Murphy bed, and my idea of fancy dining is takeout from the good Chinese place instead of the cheap one. But the invitation was definitely addressed to me. Geraldine Hartford. Yes, Hartford. There's a reason for that name, but I'll get to that later. I called my best friend Maya, practically hyperventilating. They want me to attend this charity thing, but Maya, I don't belong there. These people probably spend more on their shoes than I make in a month. Maya laughed in that way she does when she thinks I'm being ridiculous. Geraldine, honey, you got invited for a reason. Maybe it's time you stopped hiding and actually showed the world who you are. If only she knew how complicated that was. The night of the gala, I stood in front of my tiny bathroom mirror, trying to make my simple black dress look like it belonged in a room full of designers. It was the nicest thing I owned, a classic cut that I'd bought on sale 2 years ago for my college friend's wedding. I'd paired it with my grandmother's pearl earrings and the one good pair of heels I owned. Looking at myself, I felt like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. The venue took my breath away. The grand ballroom at the plaza was transformed into a winter wonderland, with crystal chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across white and gold decorations. Ice sculptures of angels graced every corner, and a string quartet played softly near the entrance. I handed my coat to the attendant, took a deep breath, and stepped into a world I'd only ever seen in movies. The first thing I noticed was how everyone seemed to know each other. Air kisses and champagne glasses clinked as women in stunning gowns glided between groups of men in perfectly tailored tuxedos. I recognized some faces from magazine covers and society pages, the kind of people who summered in the Hamptons and had their own tables at exclusive restaurants. I made my way to the silent auction displays, thinking I could blend in by looking interested in the charity items. That's when I first saw her. Amanda Carter stood near a display of jewelry donated by Tiffany, holding court with a group of women who hung on her every word. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, blonde, perfectly put together in a stunning red gown that probably cost more than my car. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists, and when she laughed, it was the kind of sound that made everyone around her want to be part of the joke. I tried to stay invisible, focusing on the auction items and reading about the charity work the foundation supported, but somehow I kept ending up in Amanda's orbit. It started with small things. She'd glance over when I was looking at something, her eyes taking in my outfit with the kind of assessment women do when they're calculating your net worth based on your accessories. "That's an interesting choice," she said the first time she spoke to me directly. I was admiring a painting donated by a local artist, and she'd appeared beside me like a designer-clad ghost. Very community college art class. I felt my cheeks burn, but I managed to smile. "I think it's beautiful. The artist really captured something genuine here." She made a small sound that might have been agreement or might have been dismissal. "I suppose everyone sees art differently. I prefer pieces with more sophistication. Like the Monet over there." She gestured toward a painting surrounded by several serious-looking collectors. Of course, not everyone has the background to appreciate the masters. That should have been my first warning about the kind of person Amanda Carter was, but I was determined not to let her intimidate me. I belonged here just as much as anyone else, even if my dress came from a department store instead of a boutique. As the evening progressed, Amanda's comments became less subtle. When I mentioned that I worked with families in need, she raised an eyebrow and said, "How noble of you to work with the less fortunate. It must be so rewarding to give back when you have so much." The way she said it made it clear she didn't think I had much of anything to give. When I talked about the community center's programs, she interrupted with stories about her charity work, which seemed to consist mainly of writing checks and attending luncheons. "The thing about charity," she explained to the group of women who'd gathered around us, "is knowing how to do it properly. Anyone can hand out sandwiches, but it takes real understanding to create lasting change." I bit my tongue, thinking about the families I worked with every day, the kids I helped with homework, the single mothers I connected with job training programs. But this wasn't the time or place to argue about who understood charity better. The breaking point came when Amanda had clearly had too much champagne. I was standing near the dessert table trying to decide if I was brave enough to try the elaborate chocolate creation when she approached with her entire entourage in tow. "Well, if it isn't our little social worker," she said, her voice carrying across the nearby conversations. "Tell me, dear, how exactly did you manage to get invited to this? Did you win some sort of contest for the deserving poor?" The women around her giggled, and I felt every pair of eyes in the vicinity turn toward us. My face burned with embarrassment, but I tried to maintain my dignity. "I received an invitation, just like everyone else here." "Oh, I'm sure you did," Amanda continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But let's be honest, darling. Look around you. Do you really think you belong here with us? I mean, that dress is, well, it's very Walmart chic, isn't it?" More laughter rippled through her audience. Someone pulled out their phone and I realized they were recording this humiliation for their social media. My hands trembled as I set down my champagne glass. "I think you've had enough to drink," I said quietly, trying to diffuse the situation. That was the wrong thing to say. Amanda's eyes flashed with anger and her voice rose even higher. "Enough to drink? Oh, you sweet, pathetic little thing. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my husband is? I could buy and sell you 100 times over. You're nothing but a charity case yourself, pretending to play in the big leagues." The crowd around us had grown larger, drawn by the drama unfolding like moths to a flame. I could see phones being raised, capturing every moment of my humiliation. My heart pounded in my chest, and I wanted nothing more than to disappear through the marble floor. "You know what?" Amanda continued, grabbing a fresh glass of red wine from a passing waiter. "I think it's time someone taught you a lesson about knowing your place." Everything happened in slow motion. I saw her arm move, saw the wine arcing through the air, felt the cold liquid hit my face and soak into my dress. The glass fell from her hand and shattered on the marble floor with a sound like breaking dreams. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Now you look like the pathetic nobody you really are." The silence that followed was deafening. Red wine dripped from my hair onto my ruined dress, and I stood there frozen, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. Some people looked horrified, others seemed entertained by the spectacle, and a few were still recording, probably already planning their posts about the drama at the Hartford Gala. That's when I heard the commotion at the entrance. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a wave. "He's here. I didn't think he was coming. Oh my God, it's actually him." I didn't turn around at first. I was too busy trying to process what had just happened, wine still dripping from my face, my dignity scattered on the floor like the pieces of Amanda's wine glass. But then I felt a familiar presence behind me, a warmth I knew better than my own heartbeat. "Geraldine." The voice was quiet, but it carried across the suddenly silent ballroom like thunder. Every conversation stopped, every phone lowered. Even Amanda's triumphant smirk began to fade as she turned toward the entrance. Standing there in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo was Daniel Hartford. Not just any Daniel Hartford, but the Daniel Hartford, billionaire philanthropist, owner of Hartford Industries, and the man whose name was on the foundation hosting this very gala. His dark hair was slightly tousled from the December wind, and his usually warm brown eyes were hard as stones as he took in the scene before him. But what made Amanda's face go completely white wasn't just seeing Daniel Hartford in person. It was watching him rush across the ballroom, past all the important guests and society wives, straight to me. It was seeing him pull out his handkerchief and gently wipe the wine from my face with hands that shook with barely controlled rage. "Are you hurt?" he asked me softly, his thumb brushing a drop of wine from my cheek. "Did she hurt you?" The entire ballroom held its breath. Amanda stood frozen, the color draining from her face as the implications of what she was witnessing began to sink in. The woman she'd just humiliated, the nobody she'd thrown wine at, was being treated with infinite tenderness by the most powerful man in the room. "I'm okay," I whispered, though we both knew I wasn't. "Not really." Daniel's jaw tightened as he turned to face the crowd. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but there was steel underneath that made everyone take a step back. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my wife, Geraldine Hartford." The gasps that rippled through the ballroom were audible. Amanda's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and joined the wreckage of the wine glass on the floor. The women who'd been laughing at me moments before suddenly found their shoes fascinating. The phones that had been recording my humiliation were quickly tucked away. "My wife," Daniel continued, his arm protective around my shoulders, "is the most generous, compassionate person I know. She works tirelessly to help families in our community, often putting their needs before her own. She insisted we keep our marriage private because she didn't want the attention that comes with my name to interfere with her work or change how the families she helps see her." His eyes found Amanda in the crowd, and his voice grew colder. What I just witnessed was not only an assault on my wife, but a display of the kind of cruelty and entitlement that has no place in civilized society, let alone at an event meant to support those in need. Amanda tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. The confident, cruel woman who'd been holding court just minutes before had vanished, replaced by someone who clearly understood she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. "Security," Daniel said quietly, and immediately 2 men in dark suits appeared. "Please escort Mrs. Carter out. She's no longer welcome at any Hartford Foundation events." As Amanda was led away, her designer heels clicking frantically against the marble as she tried to maintain some shred of dignity, Daniel turned back to me. His public mask slipped away, and I saw the man I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago, the one who brought me coffee when I worked late at the community center, who listened to stories about the families I helped, who understood why I needed to keep working even though his wealth meant I never had to worry about money again. "I'm sorry," he whispered against my hair. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner." "You couldn't have known," I replied, but he shook his head. "I should have insisted we go public sooner. I should have protected you better." The crowd around us was still processing what they'd witnessed. The revelation that the woman they'd watched being humiliated was married to Daniel Hartford had shifted the entire energy of the room. Suddenly, everyone wanted to apologize, to explain that they hadn't been part of Amanda's cruelty, to somehow distance themselves from what had happened. But Daniel wasn't interested in their explanations. He helped me gather what was left of my dignity, and together we walked toward the exit. As we passed the groups of society wives and business moguls, I heard the whispers starting. "Did you know? How long have they been married? Oh God, I can't believe Amanda did that to Daniel Hartford's wife." Outside in the December air, Daniel wrapped his coat around my shoulders and pulled me close. "Are you really okay?" he asked, searching my face in the glow of the streetlights. I thought about it for a moment. The wine had been washed from my face, but my dress was still stained. My evening had been ruined, and I'd been humiliated in front of dozens of people. But standing there in my husband's arms, feeling his fierce protectiveness and unconditional love, I realized something important. "I'm better than okay," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I have to hide who I am or apologize for not being enough. Amanda Carter had intended to destroy me that night, to put me in what she thought was my place. Instead, she'd freed me from the prison of my own insecurities. She'd forced the truth into the light, and that truth was that I was worthy of love, respect, and protection, not because of who I'd married, but because of who I was. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Social media was flooded with videos of the incident, but the narrative had completely shifted. Amanda wasn't being celebrated for putting an upstart in her place. She was being condemned for her cruelty to a woman who dedicated her life to helping others. The hashtag number Know Your Worth began trending, with people sharing their own stories of being judged unfairly based on their clothes, jobs, or social status. Amanda's husband filed for divorce within the week. Her social standing, built on nothing more substantial than wealth and cruelty, crumbled overnight. The charities she'd been involved with quietly removed her from their boards, and the society friends who'd laughed at her jokes suddenly had very busy schedules. As for me, I went back to work at the community center the next Monday, but everything was different. Daniel and I decided it was time to stop hiding our marriage, and with that decision came a freedom I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I could finally be myself completely. The woman who'd grown up working class and never forgot where she came from, and also the woman who'd married a billionaire and had the resources to make real change in the world. The Hartford Foundation expanded its community programs, funding initiatives I'd only dreamed about before. But more importantly, I learned that my worth had never been tied to my bank account, my clothes, or the approval of people like Amanda Carter. It was tied to the love I gave, the work I did, and the person I chose to be every single day. Sometimes I think about that night, and what would have happened if Daniel hadn't walked in when he did? Would I have found my voice eventually? Would I have stood up to Amanda on my own? I like to think I would have, but I'm grateful I didn't have to find out. Because sometimes, having someone who sees your worth and isn't afraid to defend it is exactly what you need to remember your own strength. The red wine stain never came out of that black dress, but I kept it anyway. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually the doorways to our best ones, and that no matter how powerful someone thinks they are, karma has a way of evening the score when you least expect it. Amanda Carter learned that night that you should never judge someone by their appearance, their job, or their quiet demeanor, because you never know who they really are, who loves them, or what kind of strength they're capable of when pushed too far. And me? I learned that I was never the nobody she claimed I was. I was exactly who I was meant to be, wine stains and all. That night changed everything for me, but it also taught me something I want to share with you. Your worth isn't determined by what you wear, where you work, or how much money you have. It's determined by how you treat others and how you choose to show up in the world. Amanda Carter forgot that lesson, and it cost her everything. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own worth, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. And remember, treat everyone with kindness and respect, because you never know whose life you're touching or whose story you're becoming part of. The person you dismiss today might just surprise you tomorrow.